Hey, everybody, welcome back to your Dawn of Autonomy podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host, CEO of P3 Tech Consulting, and now also publisher at Autonomy Global. If you haven't signed up for our newsletter, please do that. We're in April, everybody. Can you believe it? 2025, it's April, and we are dedicating this month to probably one of the most timely topics, quite frankly, in aviation safety and standards. And we are very fortunate to have with us here today Lisa B from Viasat. Viasat has kindly sponsored this month dedicated to this super important topic. And great to have you here, Lisa.
Hi, Dawn. It's great to be here. Great to see you again. And as always, I'm delighted to be talking about safety standards and especially in support of this new industry.
Absolutely. So Lisa said again, because if you missed it last year, she was on our global regulations panel for Law Tech Connect. All of those panels are actually on Autonomy Global under podcast regulations. So check that one out. It was an amazing panel. And Lisa talked about ICAO and kind of what's happening at that international level. We might get into that a little bit here, but go back and look at that. I want to obviously focus on the drone and AAM community and what Viasat is bringing to the table in terms of safety and standards both. But before we do that, Lisa, for those that don't know you, can you give a little bit of background about yourself first?
Okay, well, I'm a retired air traffic controller. I spent a good 20 plus years with the FAA in air traffic control and air traffic management and all of the other things you do there, testing and procedures and requirements. And I've been with Inmarsat, now Viasat, for the past 9 years. And I'm their director of air traffic services. So working on SATCOM support for aviation safety and specifically for the air traffic community and the services that we provide there. And part of that translates into our C2 link services for UAS and AAM.
Yes, so C2, I'm sure most folks know this that are watching right now, but if you don't, that's command and control. And UAS, uncrewed aircraft systems, AAM, advanced air mobility, and that kind of is a broad term, really. So you mentioned Inmarsat, and then there's Viasat, and at some point there was a merger. And so, can you tell us a little bit about that history and basically the rich history in satellite communications and aviation and maritime that this merger brings to the table?
Sure, Don. Actually, Viasat acquired Inmarsat in 2023, and they're both owners and operators of geosynchronous satellite constellations. And so now we brought those organizations together. They both offered aviation communications, but Inmarsat specifically offered aviation safety communications, and that derived originally from maritime communications. So we are big in the world of aviation safety satellite communications and maritime safety satellite communications. We've been providing aviation safety communications for over 30 years to the commercial air transport world. And so now we're bringing that same skill set and that same depth and engagement with all of the regulatory infrastructure that supports aviation safety into the uncrewed aircraft, advanced air mobility sector. It's the same expertise, same satellite link system, same engagement with the standards and the regulatory bodies into now Viasat.
Awesome, awesome. So you used a term that maybe not everybody uses has familiarity with, Lisa. Geosynchronous orbit is what we're talking about, right? So there's LEO, low Earth orbit, GEO, and MEO. I think
Right.
it's MEO, right?
Yes.
Um, and it's interesting, Lisa, how important space is to the drone or UAS and AAM industries. Not everybody has connected those dots. Can you explain what geo satellites are in context of space?
Okay. Well, so with a geosynchronous orbit, our satellites are about 22,000 miles above the surface of the Earth.
Wow.
And it takes really 3 satellites to cover the full Earth's surface. And our satellites are they are launched and they're flown into a specific location, and it stays there relative to the Earth's rotation. So a Leo constellation, I believe they're right around 500 miles above the Earth's surface, so significantly lower, and it takes many, many more satellites to cover the surface of the Earth. And so with a geo satellite, there are advantages in terms of kind of consistency, continuity, a consistent type of performance, and other advantages. And then specifically what we provide is for safety services is L-band communications. And L-band spectrum is a very high availability spectrum. It's protected specifically for safety use. The availability is around 99.9%, and it's resilient to things like rain fade. And so that's why that spectrum is so important for safety communications, because you want not only very fast communications, you want them to be highly reliable. You don't want dropped signals. You don't want loss of the signal. So that's really a key component. And that's what we bring to CT-Link. And of course, with satellite, you don't have the line of sight issues that you have with terrestrial systems like cellular, like LTE. You have 22,000 miles. You don't get blocked by mountains. So you can, and it works at any altitude from the ground up. We even provide services. We provide communication services for other satellites, for low Earth orbit satellites. So
Oh, wow. All right. So, I mean, you're really kind of getting at the heart of it and why Viasat is deeply in the drone and AAM market. It's this idea of beyond visual line of sight and those strong command and control links based on your rich history. I want to talk a little bit more about that history. And I think we have a slide that kind of goes through some of the background of the company, and so I want to pop that up here. Tell us a little bit about, you mentioned standards development and your work with regulators. That's kind of the second bullet here on this slide. Lisa, can you elaborate a little bit about that?
sure. As a safety communications provider for critical safety services for aviation and maritime, we have been engaging with ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, the International Maritime Organizations, for global safety standards and rules for decades. Additionally, in the aviation community, we've been participating in standards development organizations like RTCA, like EuroCAI, like AEC, because we need to be able, those bodies need to be able to take advantage of our expertise and our familiarity with our technologies and where we're taking them, so that they can benefit from being aware of the state of the art as those technologies change. And at the same time, we need to understand what their operational needs are and what their requirements are, what issues they're facing, and what new types of services and capabilities they desire to be able to provide a really safe and efficient service. So we engage, we chair some of the teams within those groups. It's just been a constant communication for the last 30 years. And of course, now we have groups within all of those organizations that are specifically oriented toward developing the standards and regulatory infrastructure for UAS and AAM.
Yeah, I mean, this is really being built from well, I'd say from the ground up, but in your case, from the space down and everything in between. And Lisa, as I think about it, there's really nothing more important right now in this point in time than industry engagement, like folks like you and Viasat going to these bodies when we're seeing our federal government pulling back from participating in some of these. For those that don't know, and by the way, guys, we are live. So, and Lisa's amazing with incredible background experience. So, if you got any questions, just go ahead and drop them in the chat, and we'll get to those. Um, but Phil Kenyon, I'm sure you know Phil, retired Rear Admiral from NOAA. He wrote an amazing op-ed for Autonomy Global about his concerns with that kind of American or U.S. pullback from these standards bodies, and how critical it is for that engagement. You mentioned UAS and communications link. Is that for ASTM? Is that like working group 38? Is that the one that's working on that, or is that something different, Lisa?
So I don't specifically engage with ASTM, so I'd have to confirm
You're
with
like
one of my
IK.
colleagues. Now, we are supporting RTCA, SC228, SC222, and the development of DO 377, which are the MASS, the Minimum Aviation System Performance Standards for UAS in the US. So we're participating in that, and we're also participating with the ICAO Remotely Piloted Aircraft Systems Panel. I sit on the C2 work group. There's also a task force for required link performance, and that would be for the C2 link. And one of my colleagues is also participating with the Advanced Air Mobility Study Group. And then we're also on non-RPAS expert groups that will also engage with the RPAS panel. And we're heavily involved in developing. There's a whole slew of standards being developed for this industry, for the airframes, for the power systems to address detect and avoid technologies, loss link procedures. We tend to focus on the areas that involve particularly the things that would be supported and enabled by our satellite communication links.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And you know what people may not realize, they might be thinking, well, all I care about are domestic rules. Why do I care about what's happening internationally? I don't have plans to do business beyond the US borders, but 12 nautical miles out to sea, 12.1, now you're international waters, and the airspace over that is going to track those rules. And so, it does behoove people to appreciate and understand these rules, and the importance it is when folks like you are involved in developing those standards that will apply there, over the high seas, which, I mean, you've got that maritime history already, but how the air and the sea and all of it kind of, from a regulatory standpoint, they run in parallel once you get out that far.
Yeah, they really do. And in fact, as far as airspace goes, I mean, the US manages so much of the international airspace. And the US is a signatory to the ICAO treaty, to the Chicago Convention. And it makes a lot more sense if you can, while global standards rely first on the development of local rules, local technologies, and local concepts, and then those tend to be elevated to regional before ICAO gets involved and says, this looks like it could have global applicability. But that harmonization piece that you talked about and that awareness piece, it tends to benefit the US manufacturers, because some of them do want to operate in multiple parts of the world. And it's a lot easier to build a single product or fewer types of products rather than many different types of products to fit into different airspaces.
Yeah, 100% agree with that concept. Now, as you look at your portfolio at Viasat, there are some startups out there, right? They're building things and they're looking for problems to solve. You guys already know the issues that are out there, and you're using and leveraging your experience and your technology to solve those problems. Tell us a little bit about, for the drone and AAM industry, what problems Viasat is trying to solve. You alluded to it earlier. It comes beyond visual line of sight, which is kind of the next phase of this industry, if you will. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So you're exactly right. Beyond opening up this industry to beyond visual line of sight operations will just explode the world of opportunity for the folks that want to play in this industry.
Yes.
And in order to do that, you you need a really good, highly available connectivity between the folks that are either, that are going to monitor slant fly the vehicle and the vehicle. And you also need good communications between those UAS, UTM service providers and the operators. And you
Yes.
need connectivity between the operators, those third-party services, service providers, and the air traffic system, depending on where you're going to be flying. And so we're kind of advocating, even though you may not be flying over the seas, but you're going to be flying in areas, or a lot of this industry will be flying in areas where there can be disruptions in line of sight with terrestrial signals. And so we really advocate, if you really want a high availability, high continuity communication system, which is critical for flying beyond visual line of sight, we really advocate for an approach that takes a multi-link configuration. So you basically can take advantage of the super fast LTE 5G signals and pair it with a SATCOM. And then you're going to have the benefits of the highest latency and the highest kind of availability and continuity with your vehicle and with the service providers that you have to engage with to manage your vehicle and manage its flight operations. So we're actually we're working with a number of partners who want to enter this industry partners, vehicle manufacturers, equipment manufacturers, system integrators, folks that are providing a number of those services and want to test out their integrated solutions. And we're providing the comlink to be able to demonstrate their concepts and their ideas and their technology solutions and see how can we use it and will it meet what we think are going to be the rules and standards? Will it work? And what information can we provide then to the standards development bodies, because they need data. They need real operational data in order to develop those standards. I'm in that right now. We're looking at ICAO well, what are the parameters? We'd like to be able to provide some parameters to start with, but we need data. We need real operational data. And,
Right.
And so that's an area that is a really important in developing this industry.
Well, and it's just really starting when you think about it, right, Lisa? I mean, there's been like in Europe, they had the Gulf of Finland trials, and that was kind of for your U space and involved drone deliveries, but also some eVTOL, short flights with EHang and things like this. And then, of course, in Texas, you've got the Dallas Fort Worth, I'm doing the air quotes here, key site, which they're calling an operational evaluation, but, again, not limited, doesn't have to be limited to Dallas. You got test sites. You've got other locations popping up around the country. Like, hey, test your things, demo your things here. So it is really interesting. But you said something earlier. I want to expand on a little bit because you mentioned kind of that urban environment, and I think when people when they think of even AAM, they think UAM, urban, right, air mobility and drone taxis in a city. When they think of AAM, they also think of drone deliveries like packages, maybe, Amazon to your house or something like this. And you mentioned buildings, that could get in the way, for communications link and the challenges in urban environment. But isn't it true also there's different challenges in rural environments when it comes to beyond visual line of sight, just because of possibly the sheer distances that might need to be covered beyond visual line of sight, and the communications link required for a scenario like that.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, all you have to do is think about trying to make a call on your cell phone when you're driving through the mountains or when you're on a
Just did
road
it.
trip in
Just
the middle of
we were
nowhere.
going to Cripple Creek, and I have a Tesla, and the radio stopped working.
Right, right.
Like I couldn't even get music.
And you have a lot of in the AA, so AAM versus UAM, U is urban,
Yep.
just advanced air mobility. Well, we've got folks that are interested in pipeline inspections, rural flights. So
Yep.
we do see the potential for a lot of business in those areas. And absolutely, SATCOM is not limited by, the terrestrial infrastructure. It's hard to put a tower out in the middle of nowhere to get the power to it and to service it and to keep it up and running. It's not for a satellite, it's up there. We have to keep it up and operating, and we have lots of Earth stations to make sure we have primary and alternate paths, but it's not as susceptible, and it's available everywhere. If we can provide services out in the Indian Ocean, we can provide services in the middle of Wyoming. So it is one of the advantages of SATCOM in that rural environment.
Well, great point. And you've actually developed a very specific solution called Valaris. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, you are.
So I feel like that Valaris means something. Is that name comes from somewhere? I know I'm going off script here. But tell us about that solution, and if you know about the name or why that name, I'd love to hear that backstory if there is one.
I never asked about the name. I saw
Okay, because I didn't.
I
I
thought
should have Googled it, Lisa, before. Yeah.
I'm sure my folks will tell me after this podcast what it means. But I will tell you that the Valaris solution, which is specifically designed for the commercial civil UAS AAM industry, I want to tell you a few key things about it. One is it is based and it is supported by the exact same L-band high availability SATCOM network that we use to provide to thousands of commercial air transport aircraft. So it has to be, that signal has to be robust enough to provide communications for many, many passengers, thousands of passengers flying everywhere. And we're using the same satellites, the same ground networks. We're tailoring it and we're shrinking it so that shrinking the satellite terminals and antennas that go on the vehicle, so we can use it for civil air transport. So it really, and it's based on our newest, most sophisticated SATCOM service. It's based on our what we call Swift Broadband Safety Iris, which is our newest and most sophisticated waveforms and satellite communication technology. So that is the Valaris service. And of course, in addition to our L-band, we have a long history, both Viasat and Inmarsat, of providing C2 link services for governments and militaries all over the world.
Right.
So we're taking some of that experience and we're bringing it into the world of our civil commercial product.
Yeah. And I mean, just the foot stomp, this 99.9% availability of Valaris and this dedicated L band. I mean, that's no joke. And when you think about not just, okay, it would be awful for like a drone delivering a package to drop out of the sky because it lost a C2 link, right? That's bad. But, when you think about carrying human passengers and that precious cargo, these C2 links are critical for those flights. And so thank you for what you're doing. I know you guys selected safety and standards because at the end of the day, this is what you're providing it's all about safety. And like you said, you've been doing it for years. But tell us about, this is about much more than a connection. And you've got C2 links, but also there's other things that you're able to integrate into Valaris that make kind of a holistic safety package for whether it's a drone or whether it's an eVTOL, electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft.
Well, as you mentioned, or as I mentioned earlier, working with some of our partners in integrating a lot of solutions. So we provide a communication link, but a UAS or an AAM vehicle is a lot more than just its communication link.
Right.
To operate beyond visual line of sight, there's a whole system that has to come together to make that happen. So you have to work with detect and avoid technology that has to be integrated into the platform. You have to be able to support lost C2 link procedures. So if worst case, you do lose connection with your C2 link, your vehicle doesn't fall out of the sky. It continues on an expected trajectory and an expected flight path. You have to be able to connect with UTM providers and with use-space providers so that you can look out ahead when you're planning your flight path to make sure that you're going to have the appropriate coverage and availability and you know what to expect. You have to, we're working with video compression providers so that we can support that kind of technologies. So you're right, flying a UAS or an AAM vehicle is not just about the pilot, it's not just about the physical vehicle, and it's not just about the C2 link, it's about that whole packaging of technologies and capabilities that are supported in this very small package.
Yeah, so I know on the defense side, they're using the term modular open systems architecture or MOSA, or modular open systems approach. Is it fair to say that Volaris is basically a MOSA, capability in terms of integrating with other people's technologies?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're using an IP capability so that you can integrate multiple types of applications into the Volaris network. So that's specifically what it's designed to do.
And let's jump into multi-link because you mentioned that, and I think it's directly relevant, this idea of integrating other technologies. First of all, explain what multi-link communications are and why they're important.
So we believe that a single type of link, whether it's an LTE link, 5G link, C-band link, L-band link, no single link is going to provide the type of availability that you want to connect a pilot with a vehicle that's flying in the airspace. And what a multi-link is, why we're advocating for it, is we basically think you should pair your SATCOM link with another type of link that's completely separate, like an LTE link or a 5G link or C-band, whatever, so that you have two kinds of links. And the link management is able to, as part of multi-link, you have a link management capability, and that's able to determine what is the best available link at this point in my flight. What link should I be using? It should be seamless. It should happen rapidly and be seamless. But what it does is it gives you the kind of performance and the kind of availability and continuity in the communications that's needed to fly safely and to be able to get the job done that the vehicle is designed to support.
Yeah, well, we're talking besides safety about standards. And as you know, Lisa, the FAA former administrator signed out that special federal aviation regulation, or SFAR, on powered lift. It's got a much longer name that I haven't committed to memory. But part of that was what you're mentioning here. Part of the requirements from an operational standpoint was in the SFAR is redundant systems. And of course, that makes sense, while, you're, especially when you're carrying passengers for kind of a Part 135 carrier operation. But I want to kind of go back to something you said and just make sure everybody's clear about it. You mentioned this kind of safety connectivity for aviation specifically that you all are certified uh, to provide. And my understanding is that Viasat is only one of two satellite operators approved to provide that kind of safety connectivity for aviation globally. Can you explain what that means? And again, the implications of that.
Well, you're correct. Currently globally, there are only two satellite operators that operate L-band spectrum for aeronautical safety communications and also maritime safety communications for that L-band protected spectrum. And what that means is we're the companies that have the experience and the depth and the expertise to provide critical safety services. That's the entire focus of that L-band spectrum. So that spectrum is protected. It's got the advantages that I talked about before.
Right.
It's also very, very specialized. There are other spectrum available for use for different, jobs, but L-band is specifically for safety communications and for mobile safety communications.
So, now I'm going to show my ignorance here, but Lisa, we've all been watching kind of in a way with horror at some of the things happening in our national airspace system when it comes to just general aviation lately. The incident that happened in the Washington D.C. area between the military helicopter and a commercial airliner that cost 67 people their lives. We've seen some other I just read a report yesterday, like 15,000 plus close calls just at Reagan alone, Reagan National. And so when you're talking about these safety systems, are we talking about like TCAS or ACAS X or any of these or ADSB? In other words, what, just to be specific, when you talk about safety communications, what are we talking about there?
Okay. So with traditional aircraft, like your commercial air transport, when I'm talking about safety communications, I'm talking about voice between pilots and controllers and between pilots and their operations. I'm talking
Okay.
about system communications, your data link communications between pilots and controllers, communications, critical aircraft control communications between a flight deck and ground systems that we support. And we also support currently a type of surveillance technology that's used in oceanic and remote airspace. Those are some of the types of communications that we support with traditional aircraft. And so,
Gotcha.
yes, that's the type of communication. And we would say that a C2 link falls under that. With this new industry, it will be safety critical because rather than a pilot sitting in an aircraft flying his aircraft, you're going to have a distributed aircraft in effect with the systems on the ground and the pilot and monitoring responsibility on the ground, and then having an effect on how a vehicle flies it's in the air. And so that link, it's further apart. The communication between those two elements are even more important.
No, that makes an abundant amount of sense. And you don't need the communication between the pilot on board and the air traffic control because there is no pilot on board. So I completely understand what you're saying with regards to C2 and the criticality of it when you're talking remote operations, uncrewed, beyond visual line of sight, all of these things for this emerging industry. So super exciting. How, as a practical matter, Lisa, you mentioned some of your key stakeholders that you're working with. How, as a practical matter, do companies, if they're not baking it into their technology, how do they tap into your Volaris system? Is it a subscription, or how exactly does that work? For example, if I'm a company that is, let's just say, an energy company, and I'm going to be doing beyond visual line of sight operations, let's just say with decently sized drones over 55 pounds offshore to maybe deliver things, logistical resupply to some kind of offshore oil rig. How do I tap into Volaris and leverage what Viasat brings to the table for my C2 links?
So, obviously, if you're going to have a UAV, a vehicle, you're going to need a SATCOM capability, and you would work with your vehicle manufacturer, and you could certainly contact us. We have social media, we have websites, and we have ways to contact us to get Volaris services. The services the actual communication link services would be provided in the UAS world with what we call a C2 CSP, a C2 communication service provider. And who those will be remains to be seen. I think companies are looking at developing that capability, but the whole operational concept is you have your operator, you have, of course, U-Space and UTM service providers. You also have, in the communications world, you have a C2 communication service provider, and they may contract with satellite service providers and terrestrial mobile network organizations, or one of those organizations, a satellite service provider or a mobile network operator, may decide to become a C2 CSP. And the operator would work with the C2 CSP to subscribe for the signal, to subscribe for the signal. So yeah, we're selling our Volaris services right now directly to some of our partners. We're testing out these new concepts. We're looking at, okay, the development of the ecosystem, which includes C2 CSPs. The C2 CSPs will have oversight conducted, and so they'll be responsible for ensuring that the link meets the performance requirements that they deliver to the operators. And whether that comes directly from the satellite company like us, or whether it's an intermediate or intermediary, that depends on how these companies want to set up the services. And we're looking at that ourselves. So there's so much in flux in this industry, but that will be a key element for the communications.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I went to GUTMA, the Global UTM Association's Harmonized Skies event in November that was in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And there was a great panel on MNOs, mobile network operators. And as I'm listening to you, you don't have to confirm or deny this, but I've worked with companies like, for example, Elsight out of Israel. I believe they would be considered perhaps a CSP, and Airborne RF, Thomas Neubauer also owns Demeter. And I know they're doing a lot in that U-Space area, helping craft the standards for those links. So as for people out there that maybe aren't super familiar with CSPs, I think those are maybe two good examples, not exclusive. I'm not endorsing them. I'm just saying kind of here's something concrete to get your brain around like what we're talking about here. So, okay, got it. That's how it's going to work. Really interesting. I mean, really coming in, on the ground floor, and with that experience that you guys are bringing to the table from the DoD world, from the maritime space, from everything that you've been doing up till now, it just makes an abundant amount of sense. So as you kind of look forward to this year, Lisa, I know you have a lot of things on your plate, whether it's some of these working groups or regulatory bodies you mentioned that you're highly involved in. Also events. You guys have several coming up where people can meet you or some of your teammates in person. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's kind of on tap for 2025 for Viasat?
Sure. Well, in terms of events, we've of course got Exponential coming up, and not long after that, the AUVSI symposium. At Exponential, we're going to be announcing some details about a drone satellite navigation day that we're going to be conducting with a new partner. And so we'll be providing details about that, announcing it at Exponential. So those are some exciting events. We're going to be continuing pursuing our testing and trial opportunities with partnerships. We really want to provide data to ICAO, to RTCA, to some of the standards groups. And so we're really pushing that kind of work this year. We're going to cheer the FAA on and keep them motivated to get the BVLOS rule and going. We were ready for that at the end of 2024. We were ready for that in the first quarter of this year, and we're still ready. We're very ready.
Yeah, you and everybody else. I mean, I guess, look, new DOT director, Duffy was out touring Amazon. As you know, they shut down temporarily the drone program. Now it's back up and running. He's touring this thing and throwing out like, "Oh yeah, we're on that. We're going to be publishing." And then I saw all these articles popping up like, "Oh, it looks like beyond, the Part 108 Beyond Visual Line the site rules coming up." And I'm like, that was kind of a vague comment while he was doing a tour. So yeah, I agree with you. I hope it's coming soon. Boy, wouldn't that be great if it dropped before that FAA? You mentioned AUVSI's symposium. I think you were referring to the FAA Drone and AAM symposium that will be held at the end of July.
Right,
Just
right.
learned the dates, 29 to 30. For those interested, mark your calendars now. Hope to see you. It's going to be at the not in Baltimore this year, actually in the DC area at the
Yeah.
Nationals Park. So that should be kind of cool. But yeah, wouldn't it be great if we had something to talk about?
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean,
yeah,
we're pushing on that, and meanwhile, we're going to continue a lot of work to be done in the safety standards world, and so appreciate having this session here, this opportunity to talk more about it. That standards development work really requires industry to engage, because we have to be there to provide our expertise and our requirements and our operational needs to those organizations. And boy, we really need the FAA to be able to engage in that work. It's so important.
well, absolutely. I think a lot of people feel sometimes like there's, the special people that get to go in the rooms and the people, everybody else. But, I subscribe to ICAO's newsletter, and they just sent out a great rundown of all of these events they're holding, including workshops, including discussions over the next year. And I didn't see too many spots where like this is invite only. And so I would really encourage everybody out there to check that out. In fact, I posted them all on Autonomy Global under our events page. So you can go on there right now and kind of see what's coming up. They're all over the world, some in Canada, of course, at their headquarters in Montreal, I believe.
Yeah, yeah.
But other locations globally. So, have your voice be heard. You don't have to wait for a notice of public rulemaking in the US to start kind of giving your opinion and what you think it works or doesn't work for this industry. I think that's really important. I mean, Lisa, as we kind of close out, and we are getting close to our time here, is there any like piece of advice or tip or lessons learned that you would want to share with people listening to this when it comes to safety and standards? Yeah, I guess I want to ask you that as like one of our last questions.
So well, you're leading me to a couple of things. One is, if you want to be involved in the standards groups, it really helps to be a member of an organization like AUVSI. For commercial transport, which is where I focus, we get engaged because we're members of these trade organizations. So those are critical. Safety standards, they're slow. It takes a long time. And so there's
Yeah,
going to be this huge tension. But the only way that those standards are going to be developed and ensure the safety of the community and take into consideration the actual needs of the industry is by that industry participation. Because industry is who informs the standards bodies on where the state of the technology is and where it is going.
yeah.
So all I can offer is, it sounds dry and difficult, but it's so important to engage. And your best way in is by supporting some of the trade organizations that have memberships to these groups.
Well, that's awesome advice, and you heard it from the expert here. So really appreciate you, Lisa, taking time to explain, what even aviation safety communications are, the value that satellite communications bring to the table, what Viasat specifically is doing in that regard with Valaris and some of these operational evaluations you're doing with partners. Thank you so much. As we close out, Lisa, how can people learn more about Viasat or Valaris, and possibly also how can they reach you?
Well, we would say go to our social media sites. You can type in Viasat, you can type in Valaris. We have those sites, and they're a great source of information, or just go to our websites. And we're available. It seems like huge organizations, but it's a very focused small crew that can that is engaged in this area. And thank you so much, Don. This has been a great session. Enjoyed
Yeah.
catching up with you.
Yeah, likewise, and really looking forward to seeing you, hopefully in Houston, at Exponential in like what, less than 60 days now. So, and for everybody out there, Law Tech Connect this year, we will be talking about, the FCC and some of these rules that are coming down in terms of spectrum with Jennifer Richter from Aiken, and, so many other panels. So hopefully y'all can join us, check that out. And Lisa, we really look forward to seeing Viasat there again. That is all she wrote, everybody. Appreciate all of you. We are out here.